Hello, guys. This is Dr. Mike, and I wanted to spend just a few moments with you and give you some perspective on the writing project. We did try to hold a live chat yesterday. It was last minute because a number of you had issues with the journal entry, and I want to just go over that just a moment with you. Don't overthink that. Don't make it more difficult than it is. Last week in your discussion board, you were asked to identify one organizing factor of these early civilizations. And then in your journal, you're asked to pick two or three empires and talk about how that organizing factor might have played out in organizing and causing them to form a societal structure that would be beneficial. So that means, and if you want, if you're lost as far as choosing the group or how to choose the countries, I would go back and look at the chapter setup of the book, because it starts talking, first of all, about the environmental factor and how that played a role between Egypt, Mesopotamia, the Indus River Valley, and the Yellow River Valley in China. And you could pick three out of those four and talk about environment all day. For instance, with Egypt, their location was spectacular because they were surrounded on three sides by desert and on the north by the Delta, which made it very difficult for people to conquer them. In fact, the major times they were conquered was twice, and that was with Alexander the Great and with Napoleon. So you could talk about any of those three groups and then their setup. The Mesopotamia would have been water would have been a factor because they established themselves on the Tigris and Euphrates River in what is present day Iraq, and so water was so important to these early civilizations. They used it in ritual washing for their religions, for bathing, of course, eating, cleaning food and cooking and all those things. So water would have been a major factor as well. So environmental, you could group all of that in one heading and talk about, location in the case of the Egyptians, water in case of the Mesopotamians. Same thing true with the Indus River Valley and the Yellow River. So I hope that will help you kind of clarify what you're doing, and hope I'm going to put this announcement up immediately so you can get it, even though it's geared toward next week. Next week, we take the second step in this process, and I teach the after teaching this several times, I know many of the pitfalls. Most people get discouraged in the first week and never return to battle in the second week. Don't do that. Don't ever leave an assignment blank because you can't recover from that. You don't get partial credit from it, so it's very, very difficult. I insist that you communicate. I'm more than happy to help you, but I cannot read minds. So you need to take the effort. We can talk by the phone. I can set up a Zoom call. We'll have another meeting probably hopefully next week. Next week, you are taking the next step, and you will need to have done some research. You cannot do a thesis and an introduction off the top of your head. You need to be reading about these structures you've chosen, and then you ought to kind of have some kind of formative idea of how you want to write on this subject. And that you don't have to have an outline, but you do have a thesis statement. What is the question that you want to answer in your investigations? And let me tell you, there is no substitute for research. This is not you as the expert, so you can't write this off the top of your head. You need sources, and you need to delve deeply into the subject and understand it, and then write from that understanding. So that is extremely, extremely important. So after our talk last week and our studies about initial foundings, moving from hunter-gatherer to settled sedentary agriculture was a huge move. We think that the hunter-gatherers were probably groups of maybe 20, and then moving to settle down and build cities and empires and things of that nature required a huge number of people. So there had to be a change of thinking and a change of ways in order for you to function within a group of 20. It's one way. To function within a group of 1,000 is another way. You have to have some form of government, some form of accountability. All of these 7 factors are at play, and in different ways. You have to have protection from your enemies. Not everybody needs now to go out and hunt food, because fewer people can produce and kill enough food for an entire group. So that gave an ability for diversity. They could diversify, and some people can make arrowheads or make pottery or make anything else that you could think of. of a material nature, and then they could barter and trade it for food from those who brought back food. So it pretty much was a barter system from the beginning. And so it's really important that you understand that and that you kind of portray that in your research. Finding primary documents are going to be major as well. A primary document is one that was written during the time that you're studying. So that becomes one of the factors when you're thinking about your subject matter, is what kind of primary documents can I use? There would be many documents in like China, Japan, maybe not so many among Native Americans in America, because they didn't have a written language, and they didn't have a written down, they didn't have writing, so they didn't keep physical records. It was mainly oral histories. And of course, oral histories are only as good as the person who's alive telling them. The minute he's no longer alive, then everything he knows is gone. It's a moot point. So what we have in American history, in the ancient old stuff, it would be the Spaniards writing what they think the Native Americans are thinking. And they can't communicate with them, so how would they know? So they would have to be writing through a European lens and impressing a European attitude upon that Native American who had no idea what a European would be thinking. So that is of some importance as you think about this. And as you work through your exercises, be sure in your discussion boards that you answer enough that is substantial, and in your responses that you go beyond, yes, I agree, no, I disagree. That is not substantial enough. Okay, I will talk to you again next week. And if I come across something that I need to communicate with you, I'll do this again. But I will try to have another meeting to talk about thesis and introduction for your paper. If you can get the introduction done, your paper will write itself. You can do a good job with that. So let's center on that. Let's look at that. I will give you feedback as your journals come in. Be sure you read that, pay attention to it, and incorporate. If you don't incorporate the feedback into your writing, then I don't have much hope of being able to help you, because that is a whole part of the process. You do something, you get feedback, you incorporate it next time, fix the problems, and move on from there, hopefully from a stronger position. And I think you'll find that to be helpful. Okay, I will talk to you soon. Take care, work hard. Let's run to win. Thanks.